You're listening to Cannonball Mindset, a podcast dedicated to helping people achieve the most out of their personal and professional lives. The Cannonball Mindset challenges you to step out of your comfort zone and lean into the possibility of having a life of abundance. Disruptors, innovators, and groundbreakers are all welcome. Let's get into the show.
To be in the top 5 podcasts out of 200,000. I don't know how you find out what the rankings are, but I know your downloads are ridiculously in the millions, right?
Yeah. 6 million a month downloads, give or take. But I mean, you know what? Honestly, it doesn't even matter. It's not even like it's good, but at a certain level, you're talking the majority of your downloads are from your back catalog, and it doesn't really.
Listen, if you get 10% of those that listen to every episode, that's still a ton of people that you're influencing. So, sitting here with Jordan Harbinger, this is my second Facebook Live I've ever done this. The first one, Jordan, was yesterday, testing for today. So like nothing like starting with probably one of the most famous podcasts, one of the most successful podcast hosts of literally all time. You started podcasting in 2006.
2006. Close.
2006.
6 years off, but right there. You're right there.
And really, we're probably one of the first. In that time, there was only, I think it's 600, 700, 800 podcasts. Now there's 200,000, something like that. Is that crazy? Is that right? Am I getting the stats right?
I think there's about 800,000. Yeah.
800,000.
Again, you're right there. You're really close.
How many were there when you started?
Oh man, probably under 1,000. I mean, I don't even know if there were like details on that. I think at one time I remember trying to count them all, at least as far as iTunes listings, and it was doable, which tells you something. Like imagine going into each category, scrolling and counting each one.
Oh, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, you could actually do it. No, it wasn't. Already? That's the thing, is it wasn't a lot of time. Like I remember doing it and then like getting up. I vaguely remember the evening. Like I did it while I was waiting for my friend to get ready to go out. So it wasn't hours of time. It took 45 minutes probably at most.
That's crazy. So let me ask you a question. So just to give everybody kind of a frame of reference, you were a lawyer. You were a lawyer working on Wall Street.
Right.
And decided, hey, I'm going to bring a ton of value by bringing clients in. So your whole thought was you were going to use this podcast vehicle, which really wasn't a vehicle back then. Like it wasn't people. It was at the bottom of the Apple page on iTunes that nobody paid attention, like an afterthought.
Yeah.
And you were going to use this as a networking tool. And what's crazy is that now, 2006, however many years later, 14 years later, here you are, 6 million downloads with, obviously, you still have your law degree, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But not practicing.
I did not give it back. I paid good money for that shit.
so it's mine and I'm keeping it.
Yeah, I certified. I joined the bar association and I was like, how far in advance can I pay and lock in the rate? And they said, 10 years. And I was like,
That's crazy. That's crazy. So think about that time. And I want to talk about what's going on in the environment today. But one of the things is, if you look back, could you even have imagined, are you the guy that could imagine, here I am 14 years later, you've interviewed presidents of other countries, you had a great interview, amazing interview. Everybody should go listen to your interview with the late, great Kobe Bryant. Some of the people that they're literally the best in what they do. Could you have ever imagined this is where this platform is going to take you?
No, of course not. Like I remember my initial goal you said I'm going to bring value to my law firm by bringing in business. I wish it was that advanced. I think my initial goal was, okay, a lot of these people are smarter than me. I'm probably going to get fired. I should probably find a way to get a competitive advantage. Because when I was in high school, my competitive advantage was I had smart friends and I could study for a test and do pretty good on the test. I could study the night before, cram.
You're a crammer.
Then in college, I was like, oh, I can't really do that anymore. But if I limit my partying to, 3 nights a week, unlike everybody else in college, I can just study and do fine. So I could outwork everyone. Then I got to Wall Street and everyone's hardworking and everyone's smart. And I'm like, I'm screwed. So I started looking at who was a partner. And I said, what do these partners have in common? And I started talking to them and asking them, how do you make partner? How do you make partner? And they were all like, you work hard, you keep your head down. But then one guy, the guy who hired me, who happened to just be the youngest partner or one of the youngest partners, he was like, bring in deals and then they'll make you a partner. And I was like, wow, a real answer. Right. So I was like, how do you bring in deals? And he goes, just keep in touch with your boys from law school and like they'll become bankers. And then, you tell them like, throw me a deal when you're playing squash one day or you go for a bike ride, you go for a jog. You're like, what are you working on? Throw me the deal and they'll throw you the deal. And I was like, I don't get that. What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Because basically his advice was like, be cool and make everyone like you and they'll give you business. And I was like, what planet do you think I live on?
If that only worked, right?
Well, like, here's the thing. It probably worked for him, but he went to a private school in Brooklyn and then he went to Brooklyn Law School or whatever. And then all those guys became bankers in New York. Like that's where, so he had a network from when he was a teenager of guys that were now investment bankers that wanted to get rich. I had a couple of buddies from Michigan that worked at various banks at entry-level positions. And he's like, yeah, just stay in touch with those people for as long as possible and then get in touch with the rest of your alumni network. And I was like, I'm totally not going to be able to do this. So I started studying psychology and body language and all these elements because I took a class on sales and networking and it was Dale Carnegie class. And it was okay, but like not to be too much of a jerk about it, but there was like a guy in front in a sweater vest who's like, look him in the eye and have a firm handshake. And here's how you remember if their kids play tennis. And I'm just thinking, dude, if that worked, nobody's going to give me $1 million law deal because I remember their kids playing tennis. And if I didn't get the deal, it's not like, well, it's between Jordan and, Chad, but Jordan, that guy had a firmer handshake, so we're going to give him the deal. Like, that's ridiculous. Right. So I realized it was taught by people that have no idea what they're talking about, and they're talking to like the lowest 5-10% percentile of people who are like, ooh, look people in the eye when you're talking. That's good. Really, ironically,
that's like gold. That's gold.
Ironically, we're using a webcam, so I'm looking at like all different parts of my room, and you can't tell where I'm looking because I'm not looking at the damn camera. But like, those aren't ways that you get deals for multi-million-dollar legal contracts. Like, that's not how that works. So for me, I realized that if I was going to learn this, I had to study it on my own. And I had a friend who was in the Central Intelligence Agency. He was like retired. He's an older guy. And he had went through their training for clandestine ops. Like, he was like an old spy. And he was telling me about what he was learning. And I was like, this is the real stuff, dude. Not this like, memory palace, learning how to like look people and repeat your name twice, use their name 3 times in the next paragraph. Like, that's not what they're learning there. And I'm like, that's the stuff I need to learn. But I need to learn that and then apply it to sales and and so I started taking sales classes. And what I realized was most sales classes are for people who cannot and should not be in sales. Because when you're hiring for sales positions, most salesmen realize that yes, you can teach sales, but mostly you just try to hire people who are naturally going to be kind of good at it and or have experience and have survived in the field. Because training someone to do it is a multi-years long process. And then half the time they quit because they hate it. So I learned all of these networking skills, all of these sales skills in the business that I was in afterwards that was born as a result of me trying to learn this for the legal profession. So I learned it for the legal profession. I wasn't good at it at all, but I started teaching it at law school to other lawyers. I mean, I shouldn't say not good at it at all. I was better than most lawyers. So I started teaching it and that got pretty popular. But what I realized was all my non-lawyer friends, like, they didn't care. They could not have cared less. They were like, networking, great. That's for old people. All I have to do is work hard and then I'll end up with a network. Whatever you're teaching me is not important. You're 27. Nobody gives a crap about networking. So then I realized that the people that were interested in what I was talking about were really career-focused women, which I thought was interesting. And I started talking about body language and nonverbal communication. And a lot of the women who I was learning from were like, this is fascinating. I'm really interested in this. And then they started to come out with me at night because I was talking about it with my friends at bars. Like, literally, that's when I was teaching it. So a lot of the women that were hanging out with me learning this stuff were coming out with me at night for drinks. That's sort of how this started. And then men were like, how come you're always with 12 women? What's going on? And then guys started to get interested. Then guys were like, wait a minute, I want to learn this. So we started playing this game. Among many things that we did while we went out every night was I would break down nonverbal communication between couples that were on dates and tell people whether the date was going well, if they were actually on a date, or if they just knew each other if they were colleagues, if the guy liked her, but she didn't like him, if she liked him, but he didn't like her. And the women and I were playing this game a lot, and the guys were clueless because it's a hard skill, and I wasn't naturally good at it either. This is like a year and change in for me. Yeah. And I'm teaching this stuff, and the guys are like, this is a sixth sense. And the women are like, this is stuff I already know, but you're just sort of explaining it, codifying it. And that was the beginning of me teaching social dynamics. And then it was like, talk to my old spy buddy. And he's like, you get it. And then he would send me some of his security guys. And then, I started informally teaching this. And then 2008 economic crisis hits, and I'm in a real estate law firm that's massively over leveraged. So they lay off 60 people, including the entire first year class, if you will, first and second year class. So they're like, hey, we're going to pay you for 9 months, but you need to go get a new job. And I was like, well, I'm doing this podcast, which then, by the way, had been picked up by Sirius XM satellite radio through a friend of a friend, through the network, as it were. And so I had a radio show, I had this podcast, I was coaching people, and I was like, I'm not going to get another law job. I'm going to have a go at this coaching thing, even though it's only making me like a few grand a month. Right. Yeah. So especially because my law firm was paying me for the next 9 months, I was like, how long can it take to start a business? 9 months of runway? We're good, man. We're going to be cooking by then. That was delusional, obviously. But in the meantime, I saved like 60 grand and was able to pay my bills through the coaching that we were teaching in our old company. So it was interesting because this law firm that had taken so much of my time and energy and money to get the law degree was now financing my startup costs for my business and sort of paying me back for my law degree that way. So it worked out freaking perfectly, dude. Yeah, it worked out like if I had fired myself earlier, that's the only thing that this, like, if the economic crisis had hit like earlier in the year, maybe that would have been slightly better, but you never know. So I've never been so lucky to get fired in my whole life, except for the second time I got fired. Right. So like, I'm great. If I'm good at the one thing, it's getting shit canned at the right time.
What's so crazy about that is obviously I'm supposed to be there live with you right now in California, but we had to shift and pivot and do this on Facebook because I can't travel and because of the pandemic that's going around. And there's a lot of people right now that are really having to pivot fast. And I said this on a couple talks I did this week, is that I really I consider this to be like we're in like a human NASCAR race. Like, we've been flying around this track really fast. Things have been going well. Economy's good. People are like loving life. And then all of a sudden we come around the turn and there's a 12-car pileup, like crash. And everything comes to a halt. And for the last couple of weeks, we've been driving around this track under the caution flag, under the yellow flag. And we're just waiting for them to clean up the wreck and the green flag come out again. It seems like when those times happen for you, when that green flag came, you were ready to go. Like, you were immediately lapping people. Would that be a good analogy?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, look, I don't fully understand the NASCAR analogy, but I can kind of follow you. All right. So what was lucky about this was, and that's why I think people are always encouraged to like do something on the side, or at least constantly be growing their skills. Even if you don't have a side hustle, just be growing your skills. Because the thing that saved my butt, when we got laid off, everyone was in a massive panic, and I was excited. I practically skipped home because I got home and I was like, I don't have to deal with this stupid law firm anymore. I'm going to work on my business. My lifestyle's not going to change. So that night I like went out and ate fish and chips and like had a couple of beers and was like, this is awesome. This is my full-time gig now. I can catch up on work. I can answer my email inbox. I'd started my podcast at that point. I was doing the radio show at that point. So I felt like this is great. I'm finally I'm basically in my dream job almost at this point after getting fired from a law job. Meanwhile, my friends were like having support groups where they were like, does anybody have any leads for jobs? I'm calling my old classmates that work at this firm. Like, I'm trying to get a job there. If I get a job there, I'll throw you guys something. Like, everybody was just desperate. And I was like, nah, I don't need to go to that. And they're like, well, how are you going to get a job? And I was like, I'm not. And they thought I was insane. And then, of course, years later, they're like, oh, yeah, you escaped earlier than any of us.
So what would you say to people like now, having somebody that's been through it, somebody that's obviously grown the business, and we'll talk about, you started this, so you went to a podcast. You've done this twice because you went to a podcast, you blew it up to to 4 million, 5 million followers, abruptly left that, started back over at 0, and then built that up to now even be bigger than the first one. What do you tell people that right now are have anxiety or fear or worry about, hey, what am I going to do?
Yeah, the anxiety is not totally misplaced. I'm not going to like sugarcoat it. If you're worried because you didn't prepare for anything like this, which nobody pretty much did, there's a reason that you're scared. Uncertainty makes people scared. I did a whole episode on uncertainty and why it can be an opportunity. That was one of the first episodes I made on the Jordan Harbinger show when I made the new show. But that aside from having anxiety right now and keeping you up at night and worrying, I get it. But that can't be all you do. Like, you really have to funnel the anxiety into something that makes sense. So for me, it was, I felt like a blender with the top off initially. Like, I had a ton of energy. I couldn't sleep at night. I had a bunch of ideas. I was writing stuff down. I was making a lot of phone calls. I was getting a lot of input from other people. I was getting a lot of advice, but it wasn't helping me. I still felt like thrown around, disoriented, messed up, uncertain. And then I realized that, like, in order to take action, or in order to end my suffering, if you will, I needed to take action. So I needed to focus everything into like a laser beam. And I'm not talking about like visualization or any BS like that. I'm talking about like, okay, I've got all these ideas. I've got all these initiatives I can do. I've got all this and that and the other thing. Nope. Start planning out exactly what you're going to do project-wise. Use the energy you have to knock out the projects. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you're not going to go back to sleep because you're nervous and freaking out. Get your butt up. Go knock out a bunch of emails. Call people in different time zones. If it's 5 o'clock in the morning, you can call people on the East Coast. You'll be an early call, but whatever. If you've got issues where you're awake in the middle of the night, but you have a book to read for a show to do prep, start reading that book until you fall back asleep. Like, I needed to focus my energy, and then ironically having all those things to do, all those to-dos and all those tasks, that was what focused my energy. And then I stopped feeling weird because I was like, every day I'm making plenty of steps forward. So I don't really need to worry anymore. Yeah. When I was worried was when I was like, is anything I'm going to do going to work? What's going on? I'm doing 10% of 20 different projects. Nothing's getting done. I needed to start like knocking shit out pretty much. And when I started doing that, what's that?
I said, be productive rather than just busy. Right?
Yeah. And when I started doing that, when I started taking the action, that was basically the difference for me. Like, the action ends suffering. That was like my truth right then. Was every time I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? I was like, doesn't matter. Just start working on your business. Like, don't just do busy work, like, don't just start answering, don't just like clean out your spam folder. You can if you want to, if you're really just looking for something to do besides worry. But chances are you have a billion other things to do. And if you don't, it probably means you haven't prioritized your next projects. Like, there's never a time in the day where I go, man, what am I going to do for the next hour? There's stuff I don't want to do, or I'm procrastinating on, or it's not important. But there's nothing where I'm like, I don't know what's next. My days are planned in 15-minute blocks, give or take, weeks and weeks and weeks in advance.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean
6 weeks, 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if it didn't work out right now and you're like, let's reschedule, it would have been like mid to late April, maybe even May to do it. So that's good, because I don't wake up and go, oh, what do I have to do today? Oh, what am I going to do after lunch? It's always, there's a bunch of stuff that's in my calendar. If it's in there, it gets done. If it's not in there, it doesn't get done. So that's the other thing. It's like, a lot of people, when they're uncertain, they'll take any call they want. They'll do anything that they want. And I'm like, no. You need to start scheduling stuff. Because if you're just being reactive to everybody who's calling in on your phone, that's when people go, there's just not enough hours in the day. It's like, well, there aren't, sure. But also, you took 7 friends' phone calls this afternoon. So of course you got no work done. Yeah. Or you let somebody else who like screwed up their job set a fire in your business, which happens, no blame. But then you spent the afternoon putting that out. So of course you made 0 progress on writing or whatever. So you have to schedule things out. You can't schedule all of these other people's screw ups around you, of course, but you can schedule your own time getting away from you. Like, when people say the day just got away from me, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? You planned poorly? Like, if something really bad happens, I get it. Or if you're working on something and then 3 hours go by, but it felt like 45 minutes, I get it. sometimes things take longer. But when people are just like, well, I've just been so busy, I don't believe you. I think you just have crappy prioritizing. You can't focus. You don't use a calendar. And so you never really get anything done. So it's funny because people will say like, how do I know if I should hire this person, or how do I know if this person's a good worker? One of the questions is always, how often do they just not do what they say they're going to do? And how often is there an excuse that's like, I just ran out of time, or the day got away from me? Because those people are never going to be able to prioritize properly unless they want to. And I don't have time to pay someone to like figure out how to be productive at my office.
No, yeah. I think that the idea is if you want to know what's really important to somebody beyond all the excuses and the BS, look at their calendar. Because where they spend their time and how they spend their time. Somebody once said, where you spend your time and where you spend your money is what's most important. So look at your calendar, your checkbook. But if it's not scheduled, I think a lot of times right now, especially with people in this new environment, think about how many people are right now trying to work from home that have never done that before. And it's not even like, it's, if you think about, for most people, your home is your place of comfort, not your place of growth. So now you're not even like home court advantage. Like, now it's working against you. So now more than ever, you really have to be disciplined about, what does my day look like? I'm saying, I remember when I started working at home, I would literally try to work in a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. Like, and I couldn't get anything done. I had to start tricking my brain. I literally had to take a shower, get dressed, walk out the front door, come downstairs, walk in the back door to think that I'm actually going to work, right?
It took me like 2 or more years to be productive at home. Because my days used to be like, I assume a lot of other people's days are like right now, where I'm like, get up, and then I'm like, oh man, I'm awake a little late. That's okay. I don't have a commute. Oh man, I'm hungry though. Make some food. Then I'm like, all right, get maybe a little bit of stuff done, but I'm not really going to dig in because I'm going to go to the gym in a bit. So I do some half-assed BS. Then I go to the gym. Then I come back, shower up, got to make lunch, kind of hungry. Then it's afternoon. I'm like, it's like 2 p.m. I'm like, oh man, all right, I better get to work. Do 3 hours of work. 5 p.m. rolls around. I'm like, man, it's already 5 o'clock. Well, tomorrow I'm going to really get after it. But today, at least I went to the gym. And then it like years went by and I was like, I'm not doing anything productive. This is bad. So then finally I realized, oh, okay. When I plan stuff in my calendar, and some like superstar sales trainer guy told me this. He's like, plan your whole week out in advance. I was like, that's ridiculous. He's like, give it a shot for 1 week. That week I got more done than I did in 3 months.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, I get it now. Like, this is how people get shit done. So now I get more done in 1 week than most people. I get more done in 1 day than most people get done in a week.
Because it's scheduled, because you're effective on it.
Yeah, because it's scheduled. And if like, I have a bunch of missed calls on my phone. I'm not even going to return them. I'm going to text those people and be like, what's up? Yeah. And some of them are going to go, oh, nothing. Just want to see what you're up to. And some people are going to go like, hey, I just need like 5 minutes. And I'm like, cool. On Friday at 5 p.m., I'll be freer this weekend, because it's not really 5 minutes. It's 15 minutes and it's maybe has something to do with nothing, who knows? So I'm not going to return those calls. I don't have time. So, but what most people will do is be like, oh, I've got to return all these calls later today. So they take their lunch hour, and then their lunch hour is 3 hours long because they're returning phone calls from people that just wanted to like check in. So I don't do any of that. No. And what's funny is people go, oh, well, I prioritize my friends and family. Me too. I have a huge network and I just use systems. I just don't let them control me. I use the system to control and maintain the network.
Even with your friends and family.
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you tell your cousin or your sister, hey, listen, I gotta, you got to go in this bucket over there.
Yeah, it's pretty convenient. I say, hey, I'm recording right now. I'll have to call you another time. Yeah. Nobody goes, what are you so busy? They know what I do. So I'm always like, I'm recording. Even if I'm not necessarily recording, I might say like, I'm in studio. It's not a lie. I'm just answering emails in studio because that's what I have planned right now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take a shift. So you're on this podcast. You have a Sirius channel going on, a Sirius XM channel going. You're literally crushing it on all levels. You're the somebody in one of the interviews called you the Larry King of podcasts. I don't know if that's I guess that's a compliment because he's the godfather of interviews. But to equate it, and then all of a sudden you have a dispute. You now have to not reinvent yourself, but start all over again. And do you think that chaos is the greatest? Like I'm a big believer that right now in this chaos, it's a great time to reset your zeros. Like chaos like levels the playing field. Like everybody right now, Warren Buffett right now is sitting at home in quarantine. It doesn't matter who you are, it kind of levels the playing field.
Yeah, that's true. He's on quarantine on a private jet, or like a nice island vacation home. But yeah.
He's on quarantine. Now his quarantine might be nicer than some, but he's on quarantine, right? So you had to reinvent yourself at some point. And how did you how long did it take you to get your previous podcast to where 4 or 5 million downloads? And then how long did it take you to get the Jordan Harbinger show, which is unbelievable, to surpass that? Was it the same or did it go fast?
Yeah, it went a lot faster. So it took me 11 years to get my previous show to 4 or 5 million downloads a month, and it took me less than 1 year to get my second show to that same level. Now, granted, I had the unfair advantage of having a pre-existing audience, but bear in mind, when I left my last show, I wasn't able to tell people where I was going. There was no announcement. I didn't have access to the email list. It was an acrimonious separation. I sued them. There's all kinds of stuff going on with that. So I didn't have that built-in advantage of being able to just take people with me. They searched for me and found me. So there's still a lot of people that say oh, I just found you again after, I don't know, 2 years or whatever, how long it's been. So that's great. That's great. But a lot of people didn't find, most people didn't find us at first. It took a while. So
how did you restart? What was the plan to restart? I know the answer because I've done the research, but what was the number one thing you think was contributed to you being able to restart after hitting that zero reset again?
Yeah. So one of the keys was don't lose any momentum. So at first I was like, maybe I'll take a little break or something. Maybe I'll work on some other stuff, or maybe I'll try and work out this issue with the old show and my former business partners, these sort of not non-negotiating in good faith situation. And then my one of my friends, Norm Pattis, who's a super badass dude who basically invented radio syndication. He's the CEO of Podcast One. He goes, no, I've seen this happen in Hollywood. He's 76, 77 years old. So he was like, no, I've seen this happen in Hollywood before. You can't lose momentum because you'll lose relevance, and you have to keep going. And he's like, also, we can take all of your existing advertising deals and pivot them and blah, 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 blah. So I did that and I kept going. I didn't miss a single episode of the show. So I left the one show on a Friday and I had an episode out, on the following Tuesday. My release schedule was intact. Yeah. And that was amazing. And then the other thing I did was I called 140 of my friends. I made a huge list of people that I was going to be interested in talking to. Called them, told them about the issue, and then people were blasting it to their newsletters. People were having me on their shows. I got a lot of backup from my network, which is great. And that helped a ton. And so I strongly recommend people make that list of people that they would reach out to in a crisis, and reach out to them now when you don't need anything. Because here's the problem. Or here's the thing. I reached out to all those people and they weren't like, hey, I haven't heard from you in 2 years. They were like, oh yeah, we just talked 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months ago about something unrelated. So asking them for a favor was not weird. It was not awkward. It wasn't like, oh, how am I going to do that? These people don't owe me anything. They're going to think it wasn't any of that. It was just reaching out to a bunch of friends for help. So that's why I always say, dig the well before you're thirsty. It's a book title from the 90s, that I took from somebody else. I can't even remember who it is now. One of those old copywriter guys, Dan Kennedy or something. I can't even remember now. So that's a great phrase because you dig the well before you're thirsty. You create these relationships before you need them. So whenever I tell people to do this exercise, it's in my 6-minute networking course, which by the way is also free. Am I allowed to give the URL? I don't want to be spammy.
Give all that.
So jordanharbinger.com/course is where it is. It's free. There's no upsell or anything. So the exercise in there that I'm about to talk about is called Layoff Lifelines. And I always tell people, make a list of 10 to 15 people that you want to reach out to now. And then reach out to them, that you want to reach out to that, your old boss, your old whatever, people you think I should have kept in touch with that person. Reach out now when you don't need anything, because if you don't, then when you do eventually reach a situation like this where you get laid off on Friday and then everybody's working from home and it's coronavirus pandemic for the next 2 months, you're going to be like, oh crap, I'm thirsty. And then suddenly you're trying to get a job during the coronavirus pandemic and it's like, What are you going to do? Oh, now you're going to reach out to your old boss that you haven't talked to for 2 years. And he's going to be like, what was your name again? But if you'd reached out to him 6 months ago and you were like, hey, you were a big influence. Thank you so much. You taught me so much. I'm working over at this such and such company now. Let me know how I can help. And then you talk to him again for 2 seconds 3 months ago. Then you can reach out and go, hey, I'm in this weird predicament where I got laid off. And they might be able to point you in the right direction. They won't be like, it's weird that you're asking me. They will understand. What's weird is when you haven't talked to them in 5 years and you're like, I got laid off because of coronavirus. And they're like, yeah, you and everybody else. Nice chatting with you, whatever your name was. See you later.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we call them active promoters, but you have these circle of promoters that really want to see you do well. But if you don't build those relationships constantly, like literally, and again, to your point earlier, literally schedule time to make sure you connect with them. We say once a month, once every month and a half of just, hey, how's it going? Checking in. You have to make all those deposits in the relationship before you can make a withdrawal. Most people try to make a withdrawal without making any deposits. And they're like, no, you're way overdrawn now. I have nothing for you.
Yeah. It's part of it is a sense of entitlement, but it also can happen to innocent people. Cause look, let's say you're starting a business or you're starting something or you got a new job, you have 99 things to do. And you know how to do most of them, but one of them, which is like networking, it's a black box. You're like, do I have to go to those stupid mixers? I don't have time for that. I got kids. I don't really know how to do this without wasting a ton of time. I'm just going to do it later. And then you just don't do it. So you can't make up for lost time when it comes to relationships and networking. And so all these people who are kind of like out of sight, out of mind, it's a forgivable mistake to think, oh, you never did build your network. You never did maintain it because you were busy. You did have 3 kids and then you started a new job and you didn't keep in touch with anybody from your old work. Part of that though is normal. Like that's just sort of out of sight, out of mind. Those people aren't doing anything for you. You're not doing anything for or with them. You don't work together anymore, whatever, life goes on. Right. I'm saying now you no longer have an excuse because you know that you probably need to do that. And so you have to find systems to create and maintain relationships. And that's what the 6-minute networking course is at jordanharbinger.com/course. Because if you don't do it, there's a ton of people watching this right now, I'm sure, that are like, I don't have a job. That's why I'm available at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? 2 p.m. Pacific time. Because they got laid off. Like, there are a ton of people that sent me a note that were like, I got laid off on Thursday and then it was work from home on Monday, or they got laid off on Friday. Yeah. It was a lot of employers took the opportunity to go, who do we not need to pay for working from home? Oh, half the staff? Right. Bye.
Yeah, they have cover. They have a cover.
Oh my gosh. No one's going to go, I can't believe they laid you off. All that was going on was a global pandemic of epic proportions like we've never seen in history. That hasn't been for 100 years anyway. Sorry, what?
We just put Morgan, our director of operations, just put the link to Jordan's course in the comment section on the Facebook. So click on that and go right to it now. Well, don't go to it after we're done, but the link is now in the comment section.
Yeah, open up that tab.
Open the tab and do it later. So, but I think you're dead on. I think people don't, and that really was if I were to ask you what your superpower is, would you say it is networking and the ability to build relationships? Because if you think about it, you had this other podcast, you had all these amazing interviews. You start your own, and all those people that you've just talked about keeping those relationships, they all came. I'm saying, I've had 60. I'm on my 65th episode, something like that, and I've had some great guests. I've had Gary Vee, and I've had you, and I've had Caroline Leaf, and I've had some amazing Jesse Itzel. So I've had amazing guests, and all those people have helped me get other guests. Like, they're all like, hey, Chad, who do you want me to put you in touch with? Would you say that keeping those relationships is one of the main things that catapulted you to?
Oh, yeah. It's the insurance policy that you can't buy. So, if I'd started and I had like $2 million in the bank liquid, I never would have built back to where I am right now, most likely, having used my network. Yeah. I couldn't have like bought the exposure really that I got from that.
Yeah. Do you think there are people that try to go the other route? They're like, the hell with the relationships. I'm just going to try to buy my way in.
Yeah, there's tons of those guys. The majority of like the internet marketer grifter scene, like these guys that are like, oh, I've got a real estate opportunity for you. Like those guys, they spend a ton of money doing that. What's funny is a lot of these people, I won't name names just because it's tacky, but there's a couple of guys that are like really sort of very front facing when it comes to like learn how to make money, invest in commercial real estate. One of them just fired like 80 people on his team right before the coronavirus thing. And he was like, sue me, all the courts are closed. And I was like, wow, dude, remember when everyone thought you were so cool? And I thought I've always thought he was a scumbag, but I'm like, remember when you thought that guy was cool? This is what he really thinks of you. He thinks, I don't need you, so I'm going to fire you. I'm not going to pay you. And also go ahead and sue me. You can't. That's what he thinks of other people. And so like those guys, yeah, they don't care about relationships other than what people can do for them. And some of that is just straight up sociopathy. But there's a lot of just really selfish people, and a lot of them operate businesses on the internet because it's really easy to steal from other people.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. What's crazy is they couldn't wiststand a 1 week hiccup, and like it was literally
think about it.
The first week I got to fire 80 people.
Yeah.
So there's no, they listen, and to each their own. But, you know, I think that's the problem. One of the challenges is, and I'm a big I listen to a lot of podcasts. I follow a lot of people. I attend a lot of courses, but how do you differentiate? Like, how does one differentiate one whose intent is really pure in contributing? Again, it is a business. People make money on it. I get that. I have no problem with it. But what do you think of the signs to figure out who are the ones that really want to contribute for the sake of contributing, as opposed to, hey, I just want to take you for whatever I can get from you?
How do you tell who those people are?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, some people you can tell right away. Like, I think a lot of these sort of big promise internet marketer guys that make their money doing like multi-level marketing BS, those guys are, you know, you get what you pay for when it comes to those guys. Oh, sorry, you don't even get what you pay for. You get scammed when you deal with those guys. But like the labels on the jar is, I guess, what I mean to say about that. But other times you just find out that some people are takers. On the other hand, though, it doesn't really matter because, you know, if you help 100 people and 99 of them never help you back, most of the time it's because they don't think about it, whatever. You know, there's like the 1 in 50 that's like, you know, you start to notice, man, I only hear from him when he needs something and he's not that cool. And, you know, when I ask him for something, like there's a friend of a friend knows this guy and he's always asking for like a loan for this. Can I come over for this holiday? I don't have anything to do. Can I borrow this money? Hey, can you pay for my cover when we go out for drinks? And then you're like, hey, I've got to move all this stuff out of my apartment. Would you mind helping? And he goes, oh, my back's pretty sore from the gym. And you're just like, okay. And then you ask again and he can't help you, but then he's still asking you for stuff. And you're just like, oh, I get it. You're like a selfish POS. So I stopped dealing with those people. I feel like that's a loser mindset. And that person's the reason they don't have anywhere to go for the holiday is because that kind of thing. But other people, you know, you help them and they don't help you back. And it doesn't really matter because it's like, oh, remember when you helped your friend's cousin? Like, you're never going to see that guy again. Who cares though? Right. It's just, they have a good opinion of you. You got some social capital. It didn't cost you anything. You know, most of the time you're doing this in a scalable way. So that's the other thing. Whenever I help people, generally I do it in a scalable way. Somebody's not going to be like, Jordan, can you create a whole growth strategy for my podcast? I'm going to be like, no, I can't do that. But if someone's like, can you introduce me to somebody who knows how to set up websites because I need 5 websites done for my small businesses that I own, I'll make an email intro. So I get the same kind of referral capital, the same kind of social capital where I helped them, but I didn't sit down for an entire weekend and make 5 websites. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like, that's scalable for me. I can make a new email introduction 5 times a day. It takes like no time. So
the pay for that person is huge.
Right. So it's scalable, and I'm helping 2 people, right? I'm making an intro to somebody over here to make the websites, and I'm helping the other person who requested the websites to be made. So I'm doing 2 for 1, and it takes 5 minutes of my time, not even. Yeah. So I do it in a scalable way. The other thing is I don't keep score. So if I help someone and they never help me back, I don't worry about it. But then when there's that 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 or whatever the stats are, again, I don't keep score, so I don't really know. Person who does help me back, it's great. And I look at it like a bonus because they helped me and I didn't really do anything. But the truth is I did do something. There's a real example of when I moved to LA and I had a toothache. This is pre-Uber, so I couldn't even like get in a car and go. The taxis were like super expensive. I couldn't even find a dentist near me. Half the time, LA taxis didn't even show up at the time unless you were going to the airport, and even then they would like ditch you. So I was like, I got to get this toothache handled. I don't have dental insurance. And I posted on Facebook because all the dentists near me they didn't have any availability for new patients. So I posted on Facebook, and this random person who I've never met and still to this day have never met, he hooked me up with his aunt, who was a dentist within an ambitious walk from me. So I went there early the next morning, got my toothache taken care of. And I was like, this is awesome. Hey, man, let me know if I can ever help you with anything. So that guy was like, well, I want to be a graphic designer, but I work at a coffee shop right now making lattes. So I said, all right, well, he gave me his portfolio. I didn't really have any way to actually help the guy right then. And I told him as much because I didn't have any need for graphic design. But a friend of mine asked me later on who did my website for my company. And I said, look, we did it in-house, but there's this guy who's hungry because he's a barista right now and he wants to break into the graphic design industry. She worked with him on a couple of projects, then hired him full time. And then he became a graphic designer for this woman who does websites for entrepreneur, whatever, like cleaning businesses, I think it was. So he got a $80,000 a year full-time web design and graphic design business from instead of being a barista. And he got it because he hooked me up with a dentist on Facebook. So you can't tell, you can't tell who's going to help you. So you can't pick your opportunities based on who you think you can get from somebody. And I see a lot of people do that. They'll be like, oh, I want to help this person because they're like well-known. Mm-hmm. That's not a good way to look at it. Or like, oh, I want to help this person because then they'll help me with this other thing. If you're doing that transactional stuff, it'll come back and bite you in the ass. You have to be willing to help people without the expectation of anything in return. Because if you don't, you're going to start evaluating opportunities and whether you should do them based on what you can see, and you can't see most of the opportunities over the horizon. Like I couldn't have guessed that guy was going to help me with a dentist, and he couldn't have guessed that I was going to end up getting him a job because I didn't even know that was going to happen. So imagine if he was like, I could help this Jordan guy, but I don't really know him and I'm looking for a job and he probably can't help me. So I'm not going to introduce him to the dentist. Or I'm just like, hey, thanks for hooking me up with the dentist. And he's like, great, I need a job. And I'm like, I can't get you a job, dude. Good luck. Yeah, I was like, oh, I'll see what I can do, and it happened to fall in my lap. But if he'd never reached out, or if I'd never reached out for that, it wouldn't have worked. So you have to be really careful not to like write people off, because it's really easy to think like, should I go on this Chad guy show? I don't really know him. I'm not going to do that because he can't like introduce me to Barack Obama. And then suddenly we do the show and you're like, hey man, you ever think I interviewed Barack Obama? He's actually my cousin. Holy shit. Right. Like, you don't know. You just don't know. And a lot of stuff pops out of that stuff. A lot of opportunities pop out of that stuff. You just never know. Like, it always happens.
I agree. It happens. I'm telling you, I've built a podcast and a business on those relationships, and people just connected me. I only have a couple more minutes left because I want to be respectful of your time, but a couple more questions for anybody that's listening. There's a lot of thought about are there too many podcasts, or is the podcast, has podcasting jumped the shark? Is it on its way down? What's your thought on that and the idea of somebody, if they're listening right now, starting their own podcast?
Right now, the market is not saturated, but it's going to be tough because you need a unique value proposition. Like if you're going, hey, I'm going to start a show where I interview entrepreneurs, don't bother. Everyone's doing that. Let me rephrase that. Go ahead, but don't expect it to get traction. If you just want to have conversations with people in the surfboard making industry, then you've got a good niche and you can do that. But if you're just sort of like, I want to be a thought leader who's known online, so I'm going to interview random podcasters or random entrepreneurs, get in line, you're a commodity, there's no point.
Yeah.
So you have to be doing it for you, even if nobody will listen. If you're trying to make your mark by doing what everybody else is doing, it's a commoditized space. It's like being a fitness influencer on Instagram. Good. What do you bring to the table? Oh, you have 6-pack abs? Okay. There's 8,000 guys over here that have 6-pack abs. What is your value proposition? Oh, I take really good photos on the beach. Have you seen Instagram? We don't need you. We don't need you. So what's that?
already 10 million of those people.
Oh, literally that many. So what are you doing? What are you bringing to the table? And if you think it's your personality, it's totally not. You know, if you're a celebrity, cool. But if you're like, no, but I'm funny and I can plug in a USB microphone, that's not good enough. That was good enough 13 years ago because people are just like, oh, I do want to hear two Boston bros talking about sports while drinking beer. That's a great idea. Now, no, there's 7,000 Boston guys talking Boston sports in a garage drinking beer. You don't need to do that. Now you can do that. It's a hobby. It's not a business. So if you want to start a podcast as a hobby, throw all of this out the window and just start recording stuff because who cares? If you're trying to start a podcast for your business, you better have something unique and you better be good at it. And you better be hiring out the production and all that stuff.
And listen, I started this podcast because, well, I have a business, and this was an entity of the business, but really because I'm an avid reader. I love growth mindset stuff. So I was like, you know what? I want to start talking to the people that write the books. I want to start talking to the people that I'm listening to because I want to ask the questions. I want to kind of go right to the source rather than through 3 or 4 different layers. I want to go right to the source. And what I found was that the more I invest in now, we go live. This will be our first one that we haven't gone live to and filmed. So it cost a lot of upfront money. I'm saying this is a ton of money as a business, but it took a year for us to kind of get back. And even now, I think, like I said, we're 65 episodes in, and we're still not even in we probably still have another 2-3 years to start gaining real traffic of huge numbers.
Sure. Yeah. And you just never know. Like you could lose interest. You could go to another platform. There could be competition that comes by and swings through. Like who knows? You just don't know.
But the idea of if you want to do it as a hobby, awesome. It's fantastic. If you want to do it as a business, you better have a really good business plan, like you would any other business. Like I think a lot of people think, hey, listen, if I'm gonna do a podcast, it's not really a business. I want to think of it as a business, but I'm not going to treat it as a business. And you need to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's kind of like the dabbler mindset where people are like, oh, I'm gonna go do this podcast and try to turn it into something. I would say that podcasting is like the worst way to make money. There are some other bad ways to make money, but podcasting is up there because if you're good at it, unless you're like an actual celebrity or something. And even then, the one thing I love about podcasting is it's like the great equalizer. You know, you look at these A-list celebrities starting podcasts and they just bomb
miserably.
And it's like the company that gave them $1 million to do it. They're like, why did this not do well? It's ROI negative, big time in the red. Yeah. You know, and it's like because this person who you picked is only funny during stand-up. They're only funny when they're in a writer's room writing a sitcom. They are not funny when they're just like chatting with their girls, you know, like drinking wine and getting crazy. That's not where they shine. Or like the Boston bros drinking beers in a garage. It's not where they shine. You know, so you have to be pretty careful with that. If you don't have an existing following, you can pivot into it. Even then, a lot of people who have huge followings have failed to take off in podcasting because they just don't have good long form conversation. And that's the key to the niche.
45, we've been on for 45 minutes and we want to, to stay on to something for 45 minutes. It better be pulling them in. And there should really be takeaways. Like I have a list of takeaways that you've said already today, and I'm the host. If there's not a takeaway from it, eventually they're going to change the channel. Would that be right? Mm-hmm. It's got to be a solid takeaway that says I think you mentioned it in one of your podcasts, like that I can literally take away and use tomorrow.
Yeah, you have to be able to. Well, what we do on the Jordan Harbinger show is we make worksheets for every episode. You have to be able to learn something from each guest. So very rarely is it just like, wow, that was cool. There's usually something you can learn, something you can use. And that's important because right now, with all the competition around, look, if you're a comedy podcast, great, you're making people laugh, but you can't just be like people talking about stuff. That's not compelling. Yeah. You know, so that's why I try to have the takeaways in every single episode that people can use so that they feel like they learned something after they're done.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, last 2 questions. Okay. One, we've mentioned it a million times, but where do people find you, follow you, connect with you? We already put in the show notes, the the link to your 6 minute advice, six-step advice. But where else do we find you?
Yeah, so 6 Minute Networking is at jordanharbinger.com/course. jordanharbinger.com is my website. But look, the Jordan Harbinger Show is anywhere you find podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, it's all in there. And of course, you can reach me on Instagram, Twitter, at Jordan Harbinger. Not the fake, there's fake ones. I'm the guy with the blue check mark, not the one with like 7 numbers after it, just in case you were wondering.
What do you think that's like? Do you think like when you first got your first, I've yet, and I'm sure I'm years away from it, but I got my first like fake account or clone. Were you like, holy shit, I made it? Like,
yeah, kind of. But the problem was it was like some guy selling a Bitcoin scam. So I was like, but I was also like, oh, important enough to imitate. Very cool. But also, this guy's terrible. So yeah.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, make sure you go to Jordan Harbinger podcast. Listen, subscribe to it right away, because I'm telling you, every episode. What's great about it too is it really is. There's something for everybody there. Like you can go from some Nobel laureate to a professional athlete to a rocket scientist to a Russian president, all within like the same week. Like every episode seems to be like a different expert in whatever field they are. Is that by design?
Yeah. I want to keep it eclectic. I don't want it to be like the business focused all the time or like true crime only. I want to keep it fluid. I normally recommend niching down for a podcast, but I've been in the game for 13 years, so I feel like I can bring a unique brand of conversation to each episode. But I don't recommend that people start off that way, because then there's no compelling reason for people to listen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. To keep coming back, and that's where you give them back. This is a side question, real quick. What is the power of people subscribing, liking, commenting on that podcast? Like I think you were up, I don't even know, 5,000 reviews, 10,000 reviews, some crazy amount of reviews. What's the power in that? What does that do for people?
It doesn't.
I think a lot of people love the thing, and then they don't do it. Like they don't. Is there anything in there?
No, the reviews don't matter at all. They make my team feel good, so I have a Slack channel where the reviews dump to our Slack. But it doesn't matter. Nobody, like, I don't think anybody. Look, if you have like no reviews for your show and then somebody finds it in Apple Podcasts and they go, ooh, this has 5 reviews and one's a 1 star, that's not great. But if you've got over 100, I don't think anybody even cares. No one's like, I'm not going to listen to this. It only has 100 reviews. I don't know. And no one's ever told me that about anything.
Yeah. So you really, it's just about subscribing.
Yeah.
Subscribe and download it. Yeah. Perfect. Well, make sure you subscribe and download it. The guy is, listen, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't know if there's any better than his. So make sure you listen to his podcast, subscribe to it. All right, last question. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Last question. When you're young, so I'll say when you leave this earth 60, 70 years from now, what do you want your contribution to have been?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be all this knowledge from the Jordan Harbinger Show, all the takeaways from other people who are probably also not around anymore, and that sort of legacy is great, because there's something there that's hopefully there's some timeless knowledge. Like a lot of it's going to be irrelevant. I don't watch a whole lot of educational videos from the 50s. But in the meantime, all the people that have listened while I was alive and creating the show can apply this stuff in their lives and, get themselves a raise in salary at work, work on their relationships, network better, get opportunities, work in better careers. Like that's a worthy, there's a worthy contribution to society. Because I'm not just out for myself. Like, again, there are easier ways to make money. I could just pull a commercial real estate scam like the guy we were talking about earlier, and that guy has a jet, right? But at the end of the day, like, I don't want to be a clown that everyone hates. so whatever.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't give you eulogy virtues, that's for sure. At the end of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It scammed all these people out of money, right? So you got to look yourself in the mirror. So that's awesome. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing it on Facebook Live, our first one. So it was a little awkward getting it set up. Otherwise, I would have loved to come out there and do it live. But I really appreciate your time and have a lot of gratitude for you. Thanks, brother.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. Bye. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Hold your company accountable to its greatness. Consistent coaching calls and training tools equip your team to continually refocus on their why as they study and implement today's top sales strategies. The result? transformation across your company culture, and steady incremental increases in revenue until record-breaking numbers become the norm. To learn more, visit cannonballmindset.com.
You've been listening to Cannonball Mindset. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.